It's recording.
Let me see. How we try that? I should be able to. Okay.
One of you is going to have to disconnect.
Okay, I'm going to assign it to Jesse. Okay, we should be good now. Thank you all for your patience.
Thank you.
So we'll kick off the meeting by a roll call, just for purposes of recording the meeting, because this is an official meeting. Kathy, if everyone could just acknowledge they're here. Dante?
Hi.
We know Erin's not here. Christine, I saw you.
Yep.
Shannon?
Here.
Nicole?
Here.
Zulma?
Here.
And Steve.
So pretty much.
Thank you all. So we're supposed to approve our meeting minutes, but I think I realized that we haven't actually sent them out from the last meeting. So we will get them out to you. And at next week's meeting, I think we'll approve both meeting minutes. Does that sound good?
Sure.
So Jesse's going to share his screen, and we're going to go through our agenda for today and then get started. Cover the first item. You want to go back to the agenda for a second? And then we're going to talk a little bit about our meeting scheduled for the end of August, talk about the objectives and the format. We're going to talk about our committee meetings going forward, which are scheduled weekly on Tuesdays at 3:30. Have a little brainstorming about what we want to do at those meetings. And then Jesse is going to take us through what we've learned so far in stakeholder engagement and get your input for going forward. So I'm going to hand this part of the meeting over to Chris. Chris is going to be helping to support our team going forward. I'm going to be out for the next couple of weeks, so Jen and Chris will be kind of taking over and leading the next couple meetings, and he'll continue to support us throughout the process. Go ahead, Chris.
Yep. So I have met everyone definitely, and I'm definitely excited to be diving deeper into this work. The goal here for this slide is just to really communicate that on August 27th, what are we really trying to achieve? And what we're trying to get to for all the working groups, this isn't just this working group, is that on the meeting schedule or the meeting date that you have to present, we're really trying to frame and ideate and get feedback. And so the idea isn't to have every recommendation fully baked out, it's to have the big ideas laid out, brief the commission on where the thinking is, big picture directionally is fine, and then really for the kind of sticking points that maybe the 1 to 5 big ideas you really want feedback on, structure your part of the meeting in a way to get that feedback that we can come back at the next work or the commission meeting with that feedback from the larger commission baked into where the recommendations are heading. And then we can draft and finalize as we're putting the entire report together to make sure all the recommendations are working together instead of away from each other. So this is an iterative process that on August 27th, the goal is to have the big frame ideas out and then to be able to ideate from there. So we aren't looking for fully baked out recommendations on everything, every I dotted, every T crossed. We're trying to figure out where the big ideas that we need feedback on so we can get that feedback so we can get our recommendations by the fall as good as they could possibly be. And in that meeting, just know that there will be a chunk of time taken out probably by a speaker or a set of speakers or a panel, or we haven't figured that out yet with Miguel. There'll be a chunk of time taken out.
Go to the next slide.
By the previous working group that will be recapping what they had as feedback and where they're going. And then really looking at kind of hour and 35 hour, 45 minutes for this working group to present out. And that time is really pretty flexible, though we would ask every working group to not just talk at the commission, to also like build in actual discussion time. But that part is definitely very flexible.
Any questions or comments on the kind of general structure, what Chris talked about for our objectives for the 27th meeting? You saw a little bit of how it went last week for those of you who were at the meeting, and really trying to structure a lot of time for discussion. So any initial feedback on any of that? Did you all feel like you had enough time to?
Speak.
Beyond. I appreciated the format, that we did have an opportunity to have conversation. I would like maybe to see more of like, the entire group be able to have conversation. Putting us into breakouts, especially when we're already at assigned table, doesn't really allow us to hear a lot of other opinions. So that was, but I really appreciated us to have some kind of loose conversation going.
Yeah, Dante, I think that's totally fair feedback, and we are adjusting as we go. So I think from here on out, building in some, I think discussion time in the smaller groups, be able to bounce ideas around, and then trying to build in some time for reporting back for the larger group, I think is very doable and a good add.
That'd be great because we're primarily with the same people. We're hearing the
Right.
same.
That was one thing. So thank you. I had the opportunity. I was not at the last meeting, but I did intentionally print out the PowerPoints and then watched the meeting. And I had reached out, and Alicia, thank you for your email. I was kind of trying to figure out what got said in those breakouts, even the one that I would have been assigned to. So if there's an opportunity for us to more globally share what comes out of those conversations so that we're hearing each other's ideas, not just our own little work groups. I thank you, Dante, for that. And I guess for me, like how do we find out now, like what those other work groups grow? I guess there was sticky notes and you guys were asked to write things down. Like, can we see that? Can we see what everybody said? I'm just because when it's our turn, I would like us to be able to get everybody's feedback, not just whatever work group we're in.
Yeah, so great points, Kathy. And there's a couple different responses to that. The first is we are actively digitizing everything that was written on Post-it notes, and we will
Okay.
share every single word, certainly with the first working group at a bare minimum. We are trying to find a way, because there's sort of the level of detailed of notes for minutes that will certainly be shared, but then there's the level of detail of like everything that was written down. And we haven't figured out the 100% answer is yet, but we're trying to figure out how to share that with the entire commission. And I think we might add it to our resource library and when the first working group reports back out, part of that report back out is, hey, this is what we heard from you. So there's a couple different avenues for different levels of detail at different timings, if that makes sense. But we haven't figured it 100% out yet. So if there's ideas or recommendations that be helpful, please let me know.
Thank you.
And the good news for us is that we are a later meeting, so hopefully we'll get some learnings from a few of the previous meetings, and our meeting will be amazing.
Yeah, Nicole here too. One, and this is just housekeeping, the acoustics are really hard in that room. So I don't know, Kathy, how the video is coming across, but it's even hard to hear at your table to kind of stay engaged. So I don't know if there's anything we can do. We don't want to be moving in the building, but the second thing is, how do we get the work that's done at each table to use it to build momentum for the next meeting and the next group more real time? I know we'll see the notes and everything as you're figuring it out, but I think, I'd like more thinking time for myself. So if I got more information back quicker, I can go out and research other things. I can look at themes that came back from the groups that all tie together that allow me to go look at what other states are doing. So it sounds like you're trying to work that methodology out to get us more information and themes quicker. Yeah.
Yes, very much so.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm sorry.
I was going to say, I think it could also be really helpful because it's just a lot of content. Like it's a lot of content coming fast and furious. If we could have maybe more like specific tasks that are assigned even as like pre-work to a meeting or post-work to a meeting, where it's chunked out in a way that we can all like, and I could see it as sort of a jigsaw approach where everybody reads something different and then brings it back and reports out. Like that's a very common way to cover a lot of ground, but then we're all reading different things. So I'm like trying to figure out the mechanism by which we could all read similar things, build a similar level foundation of understanding and knowledge, and then be able to talk more meaningfully about it. And I heard the flipped classroom reference that I think Miguel has said a couple times, but I haven't seen that we're actually doing that yet.
Yep, totally fair. And one thing, and we're still very much figuring this out or the details of it, but one thing we're really considering for every future work or meeting the larger commission is having pre-reads out in advance for what was presented last time and those big ideas with the more details, so that the first sort of half of the meeting there will be solid pre-reads for that are tailor-made for that meeting, and then kind of launching into that meeting with the new working group with, hey, we know this is probably pretty fresh for everyone. And then that will set up the sort of feedback loops that allows people to be thinking about it a couple different times, but also know we're not all on our A game every single day, everything single commission meeting. So making sure we get a couple different approaches to it for everyone, I think is also important. But we're fleshing that out as we speak.
Great. And we're going to talk a little bit about our own committee and how we're all going to work together. But let's just keep that in mind, what we want to share with the commission in advance of our meeting on August 27th. It may mean that we have a little less time to work out what our recommendations are, work out what kind of discussion we want the commission to have around our work-based learning work, but knowing the value of being able to share out in advance and have people start thinking about it. And how much value we'll get from the breakout discussions if we're able to do that. Let's talk over the next few weeks about how we incorporate that timing into our thinking. Does that make sense?
I think Dante's hand is up again.
Oh, yeah, Dante, sorry.
So I just want to balance it out a little bit. Like, can you be very selective in the pre-reads? I mean, time is challenging already. So quite frankly, I'm not going to do well with an hour's worth of homework when I think we need to be selective in the
Fair point. We know everyone's very busy, so let's think about how we can be as concise as possible and summarize some key points we want people to consider in advance. Knowing that not everyone's going to be able to do it, but even if we can get some people to be thinking about this, maybe it will help kind of spark the conversations.
Yeah, I'm just saying, like, just make sure when you guys send them to us that they are what you think is critically important, right? Like, I don't want to be reading more than we need to. I think, comments and bullet point are great, whatever. I don't want to have 10 pre-reads that we've got to get done before the next meeting, quite frankly.
Yeah, that's all we're trying.
It just means you send them out and everybody else wants to, and I don't read them all because I can't, but.
Fair point, Dante. And I think like all of our schedules are also very lumpy in different ways. So I think what we're going to try to do is limit the pre-reads to what we talked about in the last commission meeting, first and foremost, to limit the amount. And then two, I think what we will try to do a better job of as a facilitation team is really boil down what we think is critically important, the bottom line up front. This is what we think you really should read, and then what's below the fold, extra context. If you have time, it's all additive, but if you don't, don't lose a whole bunch of sweat over it. And I think we'll try to make that a lot more clear. That definitely speaks to my heartstrings as a former Army officer. I used to do that all the time. So I think the emails and everything else will start sectioning out in that way.
That's awesome. Executive summaries, and then we can dive deeper if you need to.
Yep, happy to.
Thank you.
And we just appreciate your feedback along the way. If you're finding something's working or something isn't for you, let us know, because we're figuring this out a little bit as we go, just because of the compressed time frame. So we want to make this as easy and effective as possible for everybody. Okay. So let's just spend a few minutes talking about our go forward plan. Jen, feel free, let's kind of do this together. Feel free to chime in here. She and I kind of, along with Dante and Shannon last week, talked about what our committee meetings would look like. A few weeks ago, Nicole had mentioned maybe more time together would be useful. So we've picked Tuesdays from 3:30 to 5. If you can't make it, just let us know. We know that everyone's schedules are hectic over the summer and other commitments. So just join us when you can. We are thinking it would be good to start each of those meetings off with a speaker, someone who can give us more context about either what's happening, what their experiences are, and really will help inform some of our own learning and thus our recommendations around work-based learning. Then we'll kind of talk about recommendations around like what our discussion topics are going to be at the August 27th meeting. And then also talk about what pre-reads we might want for our own committee in advance of our meetings, if that's helpful in informing context. Again, considering that we have weekly meetings and we know everyone's time is precious, so we won't want all of you to be spending a lot of time, but where you can, any background that would be useful in facilitating kind of our discussions or recommendations, we'll think about how to go about that. One of the things we'd love to get your input on is who would you like to hear from in terms of like speakers? Christine, I see your hand raised.
I'm literally raising my hand. I apologize. I just wanted to say I couldn't stay on for the whole call yesterday, but I really, really got a lot out of listening to some of the national models and the speakers that we heard yesterday. So to the extent to which we can replicate that as it relates to our work, I think I would personally find very valuable.
Thank you, Christine. And that's why we invited everyone. We knew that that meeting was scheduled and we asked for them to incorporate some work-based learning content into that. And so you could all hear that. So appreciate that feedback, and we'll share that and think about who we might want to bring into our meetings. We do want to highlight some of what's going on in Connecticut in more detail. So we have a couple people scheduled. Shannon has agreed to be our first presenter next week. She's going to talk about what Ready CT is doing. Dante has set up her team to talk to us on August 4th, and we'll get into more about pre-apprenticeships and apprenticeships. We have an opening on the 28th. Zulma, I know that you have some work going on in work-based learning, so if you are interested in that spot, you can let us know.
I
Otherwise-
definitely will be happy to present on the 28th.
Okay, that's great. So we can have a follow-up conversation with you to talk more about what that might look like. And then what we're going to want to do is we'll spend maybe the first half hour of each meeting presenting, talking about that content, asking questions, and then get into more of the recommendations, maybe around that topic that has come up. So, K to 12, apprenticeships, higher ed. Who else would you all like to hear from? Does anybody have any ideas? And you could throw them out now. Christine, you said national, someone from somewhere else who may be doing this well. If anybody has any ideas, models that they've seen when you've been at conferences or other things that would be useful, or other state agencies or organizations within Connecticut. If anyone has any ideas now, would love to hear them or follow up with us. Yeah.
Nicole, I have a comment. I was going to ask this yesterday, but we ran out of time. I want to understand, doing an apprenticeship or doing an internship or a tour of a business is rudimentary and understandable. I don't understand how the businesses are plugging in to the work-based learning and career pathing so that the students are learning those skills to meet the business's needs. That to me, and maybe it doesn't work that way. Maybe the schools just offer what they can. For example, if the local industry around within 30 miles needed electricians, but none of the schools were teaching that trade, there'd be a mismatch, right? I'm just using that as a simple example. So I don't understand how that cross-sharing happens. And anyone who could speak on that from another state would help me on the business side.
I think there are pockets of where that is happening well in Connecticut. And Shannon, I think maybe in your presentation, you can speak to how you guys do that, as well as maybe there are some other examples, and we can look at national speakers. But on the 11th, we have this intermediary structure. We think that's an important topic to talk about. And I think, Nicole, that thinking through that and how we facilitate that communication, maybe the intermediary structure discussion may be a good time. And let's identify someone who can come in who we think is doing this well or has been doing it longer or more at scale than we have. So I think let's continue to talk about that and keep that in mind as we're kind of trying to map this out.
But Alicia, I'm going to jump in before you call on me, because what Nicole is looking for is a basic understanding of what the expectation is or how the employer engages. I'm not sure that the intermediary is going to be able to fill that role. The intermediary is more about connecting unless I'm missing the mark, but I think Nicole's looking for a basic understand. Stop me if I'm wrong, Nicole, I don't want to speak for you, but she's looking to understand is how is it the skill level that you're hoping the employer needs gets translated to
Into the classroom with the teachings in the classroom.
right.
That's
And
correct.
I don't know as though that's the intermediary. And maybe it is, but I think that and maybe it is now that I understand more what she said. I just want to make sure that how large this intermediary role is going to be, and I guess that'll be the conversation on the 11th. So
Yeah, and not to say we have to wait till the 11th. I think that could be a discussion, an ongoing discussion, but I think what we're talking about is how do we consolidate, not just one business talking to one school, but how do we get businesses input to consolidate it and then sharing it with the school. So that's what I was thinking in terms of intermediary. And Kathy, I wasn't thinking of just one, organization necessarily, like it's probably
no,
some
I
type
know
of
that.
system.
I'm concerned about the level of detail that Nicole was looking for. And is that really, and how do we resolve that? And so, yeah, that was just something in terms of what does that flow look like to create, to your point, the buy-in from the employer to understand the value.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to get stuck on this. What I can't do right now is evangelize to any other CEO in Connecticut of how, and it might be that we're too early, so I would never state this beyond this group. I can't put a testament out there, a statement of how this commission is going to allow businesses to more effectively, efficiently plug in to our school system so that the students coming out are prepared to help to grow with a starting point in our businesses here in Connecticut. I don't understand how we're doing that. And maybe we're just not there yet.
Yeah, I think, Nicole, that's a great point. That's what we need to work on is how do we create that? What is there, what isn't there? What are the gaps and how do we fill them?
Okay, thank you.
Dante, I know you've had your hand up.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to just, when we were just waiting for the whole meet, because it's important to get my opinion that's this whole group. When you were talking to school leads about, one of the things I said is that I feel strongly that if people in our own state don't know what we all are doing, there's reasons for that, whether it's we don't have marketing dollars or whatever that looks like. But I really want us to be able to fully understand what Connecticut's doing before we go on to these solutions and copying, national models. And we don't even need to recreate the wheel in some ways. I had an opportunity to talk to Miguel for about 45 minutes the other day, and I brought up some things that we've started and we've done and we couldn't continue because we weren't funded, and they're there. So that's, that was my opinion about national. I too sat in on the last half of that meeting yesterday. I thought it was tremendous. But I also am very aware that when I talk about American Job Centers, when I talk about WIOA, when I talk about things we're doing in this state, people look at me like I've got four heads because they don't know necessarily what we're doing. So I think that should be a step one, not to discount national speakers. And then I also think that I'd like to ask that Kathy Rep be at one of our subcommittees to talk about what happens in the American Job Centers, because we're part of that. And I can explain our piece on August 4th when we come, but it's very important, to talk about work-based learning and what Kathy does in her connection with the employers at the boards. Kath, I put you on the spot. There's four others if you don't want to be the one, but you're part of our group. So I think you should have a day to talk.
Yeah, I think it's important. And as I put in the chat, there's over 3,000 kids participating in work-based learning right now through the summer, and some will continue through the year round through the Connecticut Youth Employment Program. And I appreciate that Shannon does this, but there's a lot more kids covered in the summer through CYEP. And what does that look like in the year-round portion across the state? And I think that's something we should add to perhaps the education, perhaps guest speaker topic schedule, so that there's a full perspective of what's currently happening.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy in our presentation, I was going to reference sort of the way we've layered into partnerships across the state in terms of being able to offer work-based learning, but it's still very patchwork. So to Nicole's point, it's not at a systems level because we're doing it sort of where we have the relationship with an individual workforce board or an individual cluster of employers. So it's how do we take some of those best practices and scale them so that it's more consistent across the state. So I'm going to talk about summer youth employment, or we do it's Connecticut Youth Employment Program.
Right.
And we do both year-round internships and summer internships, leveraging some of those resources. It makes up about probably 15% of our funding source for the internships that we're hosting. So we can definitely talk about it. And I think I think the other place it could come up is in your presentation about how it's operating. I think it's a great program. I think there's just a lot we need to do to improve the way that it's structured in terms of funding timelines and it's just time is not on our side.
The funding timeline question has been on for as long as the program's existed. It is an absolute scramble.
Yeah. So how do we fix that? Like, I think that's a key recommendation for this group.
Correct.
If we could change anything and change that, like I would put that in as a major plug for a recommendation. But anyway, I think we will bring it up, and then I think it could come up also in the Department of Labor presentation.
Okay, so I think that's great. Kathy, why don't we touch base after Shannon's presentation and figure out how you can supplement what she has spoken to, what else would be additive to the group, and we'll make sure to get that on the calendar as well. Does that sound good?
Well, she's saying she's going to talk about it, but are you going to talk about it from the state perspective of just how many kids are participating right now?
I mean, I think that was in our discovery document, but like if you want to go into it more, I guess it depends on what we're trying to accomplish. Are we just trying to describe the elements of the program?
Is that what you're trying to accomplish? And I'm not trying to have just a unilateral conversation here, but yeah, are you looking to explain like how the kids are placed, how they are intentionally linked with an employer and a preference that they've explained, right? That they've articulated.
Yeah, which is consistent with the way we place any internship, but it's like, and so I think we're an illustrative example of how that program does operate, but we're also one provider. So I think if you want to expand on it on the fourth, but I think it's an example of something where, yes, we have a lot of great things happening in Connecticut, but how do we take it to the next level? And that's where I think we want this group to go, is to have the recommendations for how do we stitch all these things together in a more comprehensive, cohesive way, and what do we do better, and how do we maybe learn from a couple. I agree with Christine in terms of hearing from other states, and at the same time in hearing from other states, I know both the Texas model and the New York models we heard from yesterday, and those are very hard to translate to Connecticut, the Texas one in particular, just because of so many other factors. So I wonder who else could we hear from? One group that I've suggested is called Brightbound, which is a national philanthropic organization that supports career-connected learning across the country. So they kind of have a bird's eye view of what's happening in multiple states, and they might be able to come and talk about what could be most transferable to Connecticut specifically. And I don't know if there's an interest in hearing from them.
What does the group think about it? Is that an organization, someone who has a national view that's not from one specific state, but maybe understands something about Connecticut and could, reference models that may be more applicable to us and our situation? Would that be of interest to the group?
Yes.
Okay, so maybe we can get them on for a little later in the schedule. We can kind of kick off the first 3 weeks with some Connecticut specific content, and then kind of build in some other models and what we might learn from them. This will be iterative. So we want to start planning for this, but we can take feedback along the way and figure out what we need to supplement the discussions.
Good.
Okay. This was a great conversation. Thank you all. Go ahead, Dante.
To jump in before, when Kathy and Shannon were talking, I'm sorry, I decided to put up my hand and wait. So the weird thing about the CYEP, I mean, I think it definitely should be a significant part of Kathy's conversation. Not that it can't be part of Shannon's, but we get the money in from the legislature. We administer it to the boards. it first goes to the board. The boards then administer it out. And so therefore Shannon is an example of one small piece of that program. But Kathy and, you know, the other boards as our public workforce intermediaries are the primary distributors of that funding and have, you know, the larger scale understanding statewide of that program.
And what it takes to deliver it.
Yeah, I think, Kathy, it would be great to hear from you about all that. So we'll make sure that's included, and we'll just find the right spot for it.
Okay,
Hey,
thanks.
Alicia.
Yeah.
Alicia, just I wrote in the chat too, like we're definitely going to create space in the meeting agendas to hear from both Shannon's and Kathy's experiences. The other thing, Alicia, I don't know if you saw it in the chat, there's some appetite to hear from a local Board of Ed, like from a district that's doing it and what value that they get, and then from a district that might not be as willing to do it and what's going to prevent them, or what is their thought process around why they wouldn't. So that's another great suggestion, I think, for our guest speakers.
Okay, that's
That's
great.
just
And
in the chat.
Christine, maybe you can help us identify.
Yeah.
I'd be happy to.
Perfect.
And I just want to say out loud, the reason I like hearing from all these different types of models is that you glean, you know, individual bits of information from them that might work in Connecticut. So I like the idea of thinking outside the box, but I also want to recognize too that in a lot of school districts, you know, they don't have strong connections with workforce development boards. And Ready CT, you know, I know, and Shannon and I have talked about this, serves a certain population of kids, but that's somewhat limited. So I think that we have to view this from a broad perspective. And I just want to reframe our thinking a little bit about that as just something to think about as we're having these, listening to all these different speakers.
Thanks, Christine. That's value add. We appreciate that. Anything else we want to talk about in terms of our meetings going forward? Again, this isn't the last conversation. This is just the first, so we can, you know, kind of review how it's going, what progress we think we're making. If we need to change course a little, we can do that at any time, especially since we'll be together weekly to do that. Okay, if we're good, we thought it would be helpful to brief everyone on what we've heard from businesses. We have we know there are concerns about ensuring that we have a lot of business input. We are, I would say, early stages still of getting business input, industry input. But we wanted to just tell you what we've done so far, what we've heard so far, and what the plans are. We are pretty heavy in terms of focus groups over the next few weeks, and want to make sure that we're getting your input on what kind of questions we want to ask, what we want to learn. So Jesse's going to spend a few minutes telling you what we've done so far and what we've heard. This does include some background, actually Ben, who has rejoined us after being on a short leave. With a new baby, I would mention, congratulations, Ben. He did some work in advance of the commission being launched, talking to employers specifically about work-based learning. And so some of that input is included in this because it was done, you know, pretty recently and valuable to the context that we're working in. So, okay, Jesse, take it away.
Sure. So including kind of Ben's engagement, Alicia, myself, and Chris also attended 2 out of the 4 CBI roundtables after they did their blueprint. So those are just some initial things. But we have also had, we've attended 2 RSP focus groups. We did the Governor's Workforce Council. We've met with the Joint Apprenticeship Training Center. We had a public safety session that Shannon joined that had some police and fire departments part of that. And we've had some individual meetings with some trades and construction groups. So that totals around 6 sectors have been represented so far and over 25 employers engaged directly. I have a list. It's always hard in some of these larger meetings when people don't, you know, introduce their names in the chat to get every employer that was there. But this is just an initial list of some of the different intermediaries and as well as employers by sector and region of where they are. And this will be sent out to you all afterwards. So I'm going to kind of go through this part quickly.
Jesse, is there a way to do the slideshow view so we're not seeing the notes split?
Oh, you're seeing the notes?
Yeah.
Okay, my fault. I didn't realize that from earlier on too. So stand by. So we're working with like a monitor on the wall, which is not my. All right. So does that look better?
Yep.
Okay.
Much better.
So these are the different kind of employers and sectors so far. And these are like just preliminary themes that we've heard so far. I don't think any of this is going to be too surprising to you all, but things like, you know, the training that's happening in schools isn't aligned to what the specific industry needs. That employers, this is more than just asking them to, you know, help children, that they really need to see a clear value in engaging in work-based learning and see the ROI. That a lot of them are willing to do it, but they don't necessarily have the capacity to do that. We've talked about the complexity of what small or medium-sized businesses face to do some of this work-based learning versus larger. And we've also kind of heard this theme that a lot of individual employers are just trying to do this on their own. And then the last thing, which I think is the most common theme across the different working groups, is that employers want this one front door, you know, not 300. And that the idea that through 169 towns and 300 high schools, all of them want something different. And that's really exhausting for the employer to see. So these are just some preliminary themes. I'm going to share kind of what we have coming up. So there's been a number of you, thank you for making suggestions on some different employers we should engage with one-on-one. So we're meeting with a couple different trades related groups, employers, to just hear what their needs are. We also have been meeting with Paul Costello from the Joint Apprentice Training Center, which is, you know, a statewide group. And then we have 7 business roundtables over the next few months. So next week, we are meeting with the Stanford Regional Sector Partnership. Kathy is hosting a business roundtable on Tuesday. We have 16 employers so far confirmed for that in the Northwest region. Nicole is hosting a business roundtable on Friday of next week. And then after that, we'll be trying to hit every region of the 5 WIB regions to engage with employers that way. We definitely encourage you, if you want to attend any of this, please let me know. We definitely want you to, you know, listen in on the conversation, but we'll continue to be taking notes and synthesizing what we're hearing in terms of themes and reporting that back out. We are also, Miguel did had a meeting with 4 chambers, including New Haven Chamber. I forget the other 3. I think Hartford, Waterbury, and so forth. And we've put together a survey to be sent out to all the different chambers to send to their members to get that small, medium sized perspective. And so that's going to be sent out next week as well. So there's a couple different channels we're engaging in feedback, from larger roundtables to employer one-on-ones to focus groups, and then the survey. So that's kind of like the upcoming engagement, and really like want to spend the bulk of this next time. Like, what else do you want to validate? I shared some high level themes. Does something not add up, or do you want to continue to press further on any of that? And then what else do you want to learn? This is a really good opportunity for us to think about the discussion questions for these roundtables. Like, what haven't we asked employers yet that this group thinks that matters most as we head towards kind of recommendations? And so those are the questions we want to share, but happy to answer any clarifying things earlier. And Dante, I see your hand.
Sorry, just my subject, Cruise Manufacturing on that list. I've also engaged them. Cruise will have somebody with us when we talk to this group August 4th, because they do a lot of extra coaching stuff with us. So they're going to be part of our presentation as well.
Awesome. That's great.
And Dante, they're part of, we put together a small focus group. There's like 3 or 4 employers that we're getting together. Most of them are doing apprenticeships. And so just to hear from the group of them. So it'll be good to have them one-on-one as well.
That little list you have there is one of them. On the last slide, they were on there.
Yeah.
Kathy, sorry, Nicole.
Yeah, just quick. I would value, if I could, getting a copy of this presentation so I can spend some time reading it, understanding what the businesses have been asked, what the feedback's been. Because then I think I could provide a little bit more, hey, I think we're not asking this question, or I'm seeing a theme here. Because otherwise I'm shooting in the dark as to how to represent businesses. Can we do that? And then I could provide feedback through an email?
Sure. And just to give a high level context now, think of this landscape analysis and the discovery phase that you're all in. We were simply just asking, what are the needs? And it's very high level questions. What are kind of the barriers you're facing with work-based learning? What would be a solution to helping making an easier path or streamlining you to increase work-based learning or reach more students? So it was very kind of like, what would you want to see? What are you facing right now? And those type of high level questions. I think we'd want to move into this next phase as we get closer and closer to kind of some potential solutions to like, what are the things we really want to target in on and hear from like employers directly about versus like the high level, landscape analysis. But I will absolutely share this.
Okay, thank you.
And we do have notes from every one of these sessions. So if that's something of interest, we can share to the extent you want to read.
Yeah, it's in the external folder, right? And they have access to it?
I can give everyone access. So we can put together a folder with all the notes from each of these meetings, and I'll give the group access to that. And then you can decide, like Nicole, you can go in and see, what specific responses to questions were.
That would be great. Thank you.
Can you go back to the previous slide if you're done?
This one?
Oh, I'm sorry, one more. I wanted to, is there anything in here at all about transportation?
Transportation came up a lot. I think I was trying to hone in on like the work-based learning. Transportation has come up in every conversation, whether we're engaging with students or higher education. So that is a key theme across all the working groups. So it might not, just because it's not on this page doesn't mean it hasn't been mentioned, but I appreciate, push on that.
About it is because at one point in time, I've been talking with DTEX because I'm on their board, and there was a conversation, it was probably years ago. And one of the things that they said was that really is limiting a lot of their students from being able to do work-based learning experiences. And they had, at the time, and it wasn't under Alice, it was under Alice, so it needs to be substantiated. But they had even looked into what it would, like if because they have vans, right? So the CTEX will take kids out to do projects and work. That what if they were to try to figure out helping, with some of this, but then it became an insurance issue for them. So I do think it's a significant limitation, even if the employer is willing and the student's willing, if they don't try.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just in a session yesterday with some of the trade unions, and they were talking about how they had like 100 apprentices, let's just say that, but like 2 of them don't have cars. And so one day, the project is in their backyard because of the articulation agreements for like building within a city. But then, the next day they need to go across the state and they just have no way of getting there. So that's just another kind of example, just highlighting. But it would be interesting to figure out like what are potential recommendations or ideas we want to pressure test. Like, do you think this solution to transportation would help you increase your work-based learning or something like that? I think is like a question we want to help craft.
Yeah.
And I'll just remind you
yesterday, in that other group, if Texas and New York could just follow with, what they did or didn't do to kind of try to handle that problem of transportation. So hopefully they will send something in about that. And then the last thing I just wanted to talk about, the one slide you were asking us more we want to know about. I'd really like to know more about the cost calls on individual employers building and funding their own training pipelines. I mean, so, I think that's one of the things that is potentially like going to need to be a change that is somewhat accepted, right? And I'd like to know more about that. For instance, we do a registered apprenticeship with student teachers. And the reason we're doing that is because they used to have to do their final student teaching without receiving any pay, did it for free. And then, that became a problem for some of them. So this registered apprentice, they're an employee day one of the system. So there's that cost. I guess it's those few months that the school is paying them, they wouldn't normally be. But they also have benefits that in the long term, the employers that I've spoken to seem to feel are worth it. Like the long-term retention coming out of a program like that exceeds the cost of constant turnover. So I'd love to hear more about that particular question.
Yeah, happy to. And that theme really came out of Kathy's Northwest, the AEC RSP. There were a number of employers on that talking about building their own smaller programs. So we could return back to that group and kind of dive deeper. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna.
Yeah, anybody else in terms of like, it'd be really helpful to are there any other things you really want to hear from employers, like any specifics in terms as we craft discussion questions? We'll continue to report out and we'll come up with our own questions, but if there are things that this group thinks will be really helpful to hear directly on, we just want to make sure we're hitting those over the next couple of meetings.
Yeah, one of the things for me that I'd be interested in, and then again, I use the term heat map, but you got to take the state and divide it up into sections because the jobs are going to where businesses are. And what are the most common unfulfilled positions? So do we have a theme that, hey, we're commonly not filling, robotics, or we're commonly not filling CNC, or if we had that data, it would help me understand. Otherwise, do we have 500 different types of positions that are? Because I just look at Aerospace Alley and as its own ecosystem. So those are common type jobs. So I don't know if we could get that data from HR managers, maybe, or Indeed or something.
Yeah, we can look into that.
Yeah, and Dante, I know you have a team who does some of that work, so and publishes it. There's a lot of publicly available information that we can pull from.
And I'm thinking about that as Nicole was talking. There are limitations as well, and I get a sense that Nicole, you might want something really pinpointed. And so what we know are how many job postings there are in the state. We have two different sources for that. They're a little bit different. One is HWAL, I forget what it's standing for, and then another is through the BLS, but it will speak to industry, and it'll speak to some extent to occupation, but what it won't speak to is specific company.
Okay, but we could still, understand that for the skills gap, right? I'm just putting my business hat on, as if we're going to add credentials to our school system, then we need to add the credentials for the jobs that are most commonly unfilled, right?
Agreed. And Alicia, other than from a school perspective, other than the stuff that you've already mentioned, like transportation, things like that, from a non-apprenticeship approach, or I wonder, because I have a running hypothesis that businesses, and I'd love other people's feedback, the feedback I've gotten from them is that they kind of don't know what to do with the interns that they have. And I'm just curious to know, like, what their perceptions of what that model should look like in relationships to more of the comprehensive high school model, as opposed to like the CTEX. And then another stupid question that always comes up from a school side is insurance issues. And I know that sounds bizarre. Shannon's shaking her head, so I think she's probably seen it too. But what do they perceive as those issues, and how can we overcome them?
Yeah, I think that's a meatier topic, but we have that actually in our presentation we're putting together as one of
Okay.
the both as a perception and a reality. There's sort of a perception that there are some liabilities and risks that are not actually true, or barriers to whether you can have like a 16 and 17-year-olds in a certain setting, and that there's like we have a myth busting document that says you actually indeed can have that if you have it structured the right way, but then their insurance might say, even though that's technically allowed, we don't recommend it as your insurance provider. So then we've got to navigate that, which is why we offer different types of internship models, including one where the employer doesn't take on the liability. The interns come to us. It was sort of the New York example from yesterday's meeting. We've had that a program like that in place for about 10 years now, where the employer serves as a client with a real world project, but the interns come to a place that we host for the internship as opposed to them going out to the employer site. So it's kind of this scaffolded approach of, employer driven projects, but they're not going on site to the employer, to a hybrid model where they're half at the employer site, half remote or with us, and then the traditional internship where they're physically at the employer site. And we offer that menu so that it can meet each employer where they are in terms of some of those insurance and other liability concerns. And then I would say in terms of the preparation of the employer, we spend a lot of time investing in employer orientation to make sure that the employer is set up for as much success as possible in creating their internship placement. And there's a job description template series that we provide to them, and then we work with them to redefine the scope of work of the internship so that it is fulfilling from both sides. Like our goal with everything we do is that it is the most positive experience for the employer possible so that they come back again the next year. So I think there's a lot that needs to be invested in that. It's just a question of how to do that at scale.
I think that some of the feedback is saying that the employers want to have value out of these experiences. So what is the definition of value for them? I think that is very basic for us to understand. And with that definition of value, also, what are I will say, the minimum qualifications or expectations the employers will have from the students participating in the program? Because if we don't understand what they really see as worth of them spending the time and being engaged in this process, we will not go anywhere.
Excellent point. From the business side, that's exactly where we need to be. They need to listen to the businesses on what we need for the students coming out. So Shannon, I can just touch on two quick things. One, insurance. We don't let anyone under age 18 work on any kind of equipment here because of our insurance. So we have very just clear, my staff knows that. Two, we run an internship program here that's 12 interns every year. But to Dr. Toro's point, that's a very well-established program that we've been running for about 10 years, where we know when we interview over 200 students each year, exactly what we're looking for and what criteria they already have through their education. They're mostly college. We take 10 college students and 2 high school students, but we do all that work to go sort through and find those students. If I had a feeder system of the schools telling me what they're educating in, that would be easier for us as a business.
That's really helpful. Dante, I see your hand raised.
So I just dropped a couple things in the chat. So the first one is from our website. It says what's hot, what's not. I couldn't make it a nice little edited hyperlink, but basically it brings you to the page where you could check off what you're looking for, like the fastest growing occupations or Connecticut occupations with the most openings, with the largest employment, that kind of thing. So that's a website link. And then I also put in 2 documents that are projections by industry and occupation between now and 2034. So just some sampling of information you might find helpful in response to Nicole's question.
Good. And I think, Dante, this goes back to the part of marketing, because I wouldn't even know this existed until you put it in the chat. So how do we market some of this stuff to the businesses?
So thank you for sharing that. And we can send that out in an email as well, links to those resources that Dante put in the chat, as well as we'll send out this deck that we went through this morning. As we're going through our stakeholder.
Can somebody just confirm that it's actually like usable? I dropped it in, but I just want to make sure they can open it, so they can open it.
I was able to open it.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, great. So just to make it easy, we'll include that in a follow-up email to everyone. As Jesse is planning for the stakeholder engagement, why don't we have as one of our to-dos just to get you a list of the questions that we're going to be probing on, and then you can have something to react to. And we can, again, iterate. So if we find that, Jesse is great on the fly. So if he finds that there's a hot topic that he wants to probe, we won't be too bound by the questions that we have. So exploring, I think he understands really well what we're trying to achieve. So trying to help support the information that we get. But, every focus group we can kind of change as we go and as we learn.
Can I also point out that in the link that I sent, if anybody dives into it, not only does it have, what job openings, right? But it also has a link you can click on and say you want to be a CNA for education. It has links to where you can go and all of that kind of stuff. So quite comprehensive.
Thanks, Dante. Anything else before we close out today's meeting? Okay, well, we're always here, so feel free to get in touch with any of us at any point in time. And we'll send that information out, and we'll look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you all.
All right.